The top dogs are used to, well, being on top. But despite the back-to-back national championships, Georgia hasn't finished number one of the recruiting rankings in 4 cycles. Could this be the year that all changes? And could it be the number one class of all time? We discuss. Plus, although Sammy Brown hasn't committed to the Sooners quite yet, his Oklahoma visit photos are bringing back memories of Sooners past. Why his play also resembles the 2-time Butkus Award winner. And may the 4th be with you. It's National Star Wars Day, and fans of the original trilogy, the prequels and the sequels, will love this show. And for those who have never seen it, you'll also love it. We're putting the star in Star Wars. All that and more as the college football recruiting show starts right now. Alongside Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud. Do not forget to submit some questions in the chat. We got people telling us where they're from, Blair. We got Oklahoma, California, Ohio, Tennessee, New Jersey, Colorado, people watching from all over the place. The only way you can be a part of this chat, though, is by subscribing to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Also, please hit the like button so we know that you're watching. Already 42 people hitting that like button. Let's make it to 50. You go ahead and smash it. We're going to smash these headlines. In portal news, former 4-star edge Savell Smalls has found a new home. The former Husky is heading to Boulder to join Coach Prime. Smalls was the number 2 player in the state of Washington and a top 60 player in the 2020 class. We know Coach Prime badly needs to fill his roster, but Blair, who do you just add?
Emily, this is a player who had more than 30 scholarship offers in high school. Schools like Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, they all threw their name in the hat at one point. Things never seemed to click for Smalls in his hometown of Seattle, but there's still plenty of potential there. So maybe all this Louis luggage needs is a little refurbishing.
Love it. All right, a top 5 alert 2025 tight end. Devon Mitchell dropping a final 5 of Texas, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Alabama, and Miami. He is the number 1 player in California and the number 2 tight end in the 2025 class. Blair, what kind of player who just narrowed down his search?
A big pass-catching tight end with impressive size. Mitchell does a lot of things really well. He shows great body control. He's tough to bring down in the open field. And we've seen what the tight end position has become not only in college but in the NFL as well. So he would give one of these suitors a talented playmaker who can do a bit of everything in any scheme.
That's what you love to see out of your tight ends. Let's go back to this current cycle where 4-star wide receiver Nick Marsh has scheduled a few officials for the month of June. He'll head to Penn State, Auburn, and Michigan State. You might remember Marsh was once committed to the Spartans but decommitted back in March. He told our Alan True that he does plan to make his commitment on July 7th. Blair, what's the likelihood we see him just right back in the green and white?
We'll never say never, Emily. You'd think that after a decommitment, this one would be done and dusted for another school. But Marsh does have that return official visit set for the end of June, and that gives Mel Tucker the final chance to make an impression on the coveted in-state recruit before he comes off the board.
Our 24/7 Sports Director of Recruiting, Steve Wiltfong, you might have heard of him. He does this thing a whole lot. He puts in crystal balls, and his latest involves the back-to-back national champs, landing 4-star in-state athlete Cameron McKell. He also is considering a few other SEC East foes like Tennessee and Florida. We love these on-the-field battles moving to off the field. So time now for the Wiltfong Whiparound with our Director of Recruiting, said man, Steve Wiltfong. Steve, let's start with that crystal ball. Michael has a ton of options, but what is it about Georgia and his recruitment that led you to making this prediction?
Yeah, this is one of the most explosive players in the Peach State on either side of the ball. Georgia likes him in the secondary, and I think with Fran Brown leading the charge, he is one of the ace recruiters in America. At one point when he was working for Matt Rule, basically recruited that whole Baylor class. You got Kirby Smart heavily involved. He visited in March. He visited in April. He's locked in as official for Georgia the weekend of May 19th. And I just love the way it's trending for Georgia. This is one of their top targets moving forward. They're battling South Carolina, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt, as you said. But I think Georgia's got all the momentum going into that official visit.
Steve, Georgia still has a lot of pieces left on the board as they chase Michigan for the top spot in the composite team recruiting rankings. Let's talk about 2 5-stars in particular, Dylan Raiola, the quarterback from the state of Arizona, and 5-star safety KJ Bolden. You and I both have a prediction in for the Bulldogs when it comes to Raiola, the nation's #1 prospect. No one has put in any predictions for Bolden. What's the latest in Georgia's pursuit of both of those 5-stars?
Well, I love Georgia's position. You know, we talk about Dylan Raiola. He's only got one official visit scheduled right now. It's back to Athens for what will be his 7th time, the weekend of June 2nd. The Bulldogs are also hosting a scavenger hunt in May where prospects look and find Kirby Smart, one of the cooler summer recruiting events. We'll see if Dylan Raiola makes it to that, but we know KJ Bolden will be there. I talked to Bolden's mom today, and she said that's one of several summer visits locked in for KJ. He'll also take an official visit to Georgia the 2nd weekend of June. Clemson's getting an official the 1st weekend of June. Ohio State, that visit's long been locked in for the 3rd weekend of June. Alabama, he wants to get to for an official this summer. Auburn's set for his bye week in October, so he's already got that planned. Florida State's in the mix for an official. He could also visit Oregon this month for a couple-day visit. Wanted to get to the Ducks spring game, wasn't able to make it. So an unofficial to Oregon this month is also in the mix. But I like where Georgia stands going into all this. He's visited many of these schools in the spring already, and Georgia's got 2 more future visits planned. He could play on either side of the ball in college, but I think we like him most as the #1 safety that could also play some corner, play some nickel, cover a lot of ground for you in the secondary, but he's an explosive, dynamic player. And I think Georgia's the one to beat going into the summer.
Steve, I gotta press pause. What is this scavenger hunt? Do you have more details on this, and can we get involved?
I should probably know more about it, but I believe that the recruits are on campus. They're divided into groups, get clues that take them on basically a campus tour. And in the end, you find Kirby. And if you go back and look on Twitter, you'll see recruits over the years saying we found him, and it's a group of recruits surrounding Coach Smart. So everyone gets to the finish line one way or the other. And there's bragging rights on who finishes first, which is where Georgia has stood the last 2 years in college football, trying to get there a 3rd time.
They know what it's like to be #1. That's cool. So Kirby Smart is the prize at the end of the scavenger hunt. A few more blue chippers that the Bulldogs are considering here. You got 5-star wideout Ryan Wingo. A lot of people want him. 5-star edge Dylan Stewart, highly coveted. There's also 4-star tight end Jaden Riddell. Now, I'm not asking will they go 5 for 5 on all the guys that we just mentioned, but if they do, Steve, what is the potential that this Georgia class surpasses Texas A&M's 2022 highest rated of all time?
Well, I think they're tracking for it. We've kind of been talking about that narrative for several months now, and then maybe when it looked like Dylan Raiola was USC bound, those conversations halted, but now we like Georgia's position for Dylan Raiola right now, which I think would be a big domino effect for whoever he chooses. So we like him for Georgia. And so with that, like you said, KJ Bolden, like Georgia there. Dylan Stewart, like Georgia there. Have crystal balls for Wingo and Riddell to Georgia right now. So really like Georgia there. When you start talking about some other 5-stars that they're in the mix for, you get to Justin Scott, the composite 5-star from Chicagoland. Crystal balls on Miami. Notre Dame very much in the mix for him. We're going to talk about him more later in the show. But Georgia's getting an official in June. They got a chance to make a big move. Williams Nwaneri visited this spring. He's coming back for an official in the summer. I like Tennessee the most there in Oklahoma, but Georgia's certainly a chance to make a move there. They're going to bring in the #1 offensive tackle in the land for an official visit in June per our Greg Biggins. Like Miami and Oregon for Baker, but again, Georgia with their track record with the NFL draft. When you have 34 players selected over the last 3 years, that's going to do a lot for you on the trail, in addition to the 2 national championships. And so Georgia in great shape for a lot of 5-stars. We could do a whole nother show on top 247 recruits that Georgia's involved in as well. A lot of blue chippers with a keen eye on Athens going into the scavenger hunt, going into June official visits. And I think before long, we'll see them atop our recruiting standings. And then it's just, will they surpass A&M or not from that class a couple cycles ago?
Steve, we talk about Georgia's pursuit of that number one spot, but holding that position right now is Michigan, and they are still trying to add a few names. One of them, four-star wide receiver Channing Goodwin, is set to announce his commitment this Sunday on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, as well as four-star linebacker Aaron Childs. You have crystal balled both of them to the Wolverines. What's your current feel with both prospects?
Yeah, so Channing Goodwin obviously announcing with us this weekend. Love where Michigan stands. He attended all the big home games at Michigan. Look, this is a young man that grew up rooting for the Maize and Blue. His father, Jonathan, played his college football in Ann Arbor before a long NFL career that included a Pro Bowl and a Super Bowl championship. And here's Channing Goodwin, who's had a front row seat in that awesome recruit section inside the Big House to watch Michigan go from a New Year's Six caliber program to a college football playoff contender, Big Ten champion, and potentially more with guys like Channing Goodwin. I think Michigan's the one to beat here going into his decision. Obviously, his quarterback, Jaden Davis, is in the fold for the Wolverines. But in addition to that, just Michigan's pro-style offense, player development, and track record. You know, they just led the Big Ten in draft picks. And Jim Harbaugh has been as successful as any program in sending guys to the league. So I think Michigan's got a lot going for them with Channing Goodwin. And then Aaron Childs, this is one of my favorite linebackers in the country. He posted a top 10 in March. I think Michigan is at the top of that list going into his summer officials. He was back there in the spring, said it was a great experience. Everyone's welcoming. He loves Michigan's defense. I think Michigan's hit a home run with their last two defensive coordinator hires. That's been one of the big reasons why they've gone from New Year's Six to college football playoff with what they've done on that side of the ball. And I think it speaks to Aaron Childs. He's clicked with Chris Partridge, the new linebackers coach. Got some other contenders. You got Florida, Clemson, Notre Dame, among others. But I think the Maize and Blue are the program to beat for one of their top overall targets moving forward.
All lining up for the Wolverines. A few other Michigan targets include linebacker Cole Sullivan and edge Darian Mayo. Now, Mayo is the teammate of Aaron Childs, so we assume their recruitments could affect each other. But, Steve, what's the latest on Sullivan and Mayo when it comes to the Wolverines?
Well, Sullivan's a recent 24/7 Sports crystal ball forecast for me. Michigan and Notre Dame kind of battling down the stretch for him with some others in play. But I like the way it's setting up for Michigan. And after Goodwin, I wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the next ones in the fold for Michigan as they try and add to this class that's ranked number one nationally. This is a guy that just looks like a Michigan-type football player that they recruit. He impacts the game in all three phases on the high school level, had 117 tackles in 12 games as a junior, averaged over 23 yards per catch as a tight end, can rush the passer. And I think that he's really clicked with Michigan and likes what they're building. And so as it stands now, go blue for Cole Sullivan. And then Darian Mayo, he's one of the coveted guys on the defensive front for Michigan moving forward. And Clemson, Ohio State, South Carolina are some of the other contenders. But I think Michigan's a program we should be talking about more for Darian Mayo. He spent 2 days there in March, had a great visit, and talking to people behind the scenes, Michigan is near the top, if not at the top, for Darian Mayo as well.
Steve, you mentioned Notre Dame, so let's switch over to the Fighting Irish. A lot of defensive prospects to monitor as we approach the summer window. Kingston Viliamo Asa, obviously Justin Scott, the four-star defensive lineman, and a player that I really like the Irish for right now in five-star edge rusher Elijah Rushing. What's the latest with Notre Dame's pursuit of those blue chippers?
Well, if Notre Dame can land all three of those guys on the defensive side of the ball to what's already the nation's number 4 class, that's the grand slam for them. They've hit on their top quarterback target in C.J. Carr, their top receiver target in Cam Williams, and it's a really talented skill player class for the Irish. But on defense, they got some work to do there, and those are maybe their most coveted guys across the board. At one point, it looked like Justin Scott was going to end up in Notre Dame's class. He had a decision date. He has now prolonged that. He's been to Miami a couple times as an upcoming official to Georgia locked in, as well as Miami. Ohio State and Michigan are also contenders for Justin Scott. Notre Dame's trying to get him back to campus in May. He had a terrific visit in the spring, enjoys the guys, enjoyed spring practice, enjoys the staff, knows how coveted he is. Notre Dame's only 90 minutes from home, which people say that's a plus for mom, but Notre Dame's got some stiff competition there. My crystal ball's on Miami, but I'm not sleeping on the Irish. And then Blair, we talk a lot behind the scenes about rushing, and he was just at Oregon. I think Oregon moved the needle with our number 1 ranked edge rusher. They would make me nervous if I'm Notre Dame. There's certainly some other schools in the mix for him. Arizona is in there for Elijah rushing, and so is Tennessee. But obviously Notre Dame and the academics that they boast, they're sitting pretty for Elijah rushing going into the officials. And then I've heard a lot of Notre Dame buzz around Kingston. I think Notre Dame is well positioned. Greg Biggins had the story on his top three, which included USC getting an official on June 2nd, Notre Dame on June 16th, and Ohio State on June 23rd. But he was just at Notre Dame's spring game, talked to him afterwards, and he said, what excites me most is seeing what they're able to do in year two under Coach Freeman. He said the staff has done a tremendous job of creating a contagious culture of excellence both on and off the field. And he's looking forward to seeing more, and he'll get back for an official. I think Notre Dame is in the driver's seat for him going into his 3 official visits.
All right, so those would be some big wins on the defensive side of the ball. Let's go to the other side. On offense, Notre Dame eyeing O-lineman Styles Prescott and 4-star running back Kedron Young. As those recruitments play out, where do Marcus Freeman and the Irish stand currently, Steve?
Yeah, I think they're the one to beat for Styles Prescott. I was just at one of his practices this week here in the Indianapolis area. He went to Notre Dame's spring game, also visited the week before for a spring practice. I think between Notre Dame's track record on the offensive line, a smaller school setting, the strong academics, being close to mom, I think that Notre Dame is the one to beat. Now, Alabama is in the picture. Coach Wolford was at that same practice from Alabama. Kentucky's a school that's coming on here. Colorado offensive coordinator Sean Lewis was in there today. They'll also see Styles Prescott, but I just think Notre Dame is the one to beat for him, and a decision could come at any point, in my opinion. And then Kedron Young, 5'10", 220 pounds with the breakaway gear. He's one of my favorite running backs in this class. Notre Dame loves him. They're looking for a bigger back to run alongside Aeneas Williams this cycle. And if Notre Dame can add Kedron Young, who's going to take an official visit the first weekend of June, I think they'd be very, very happy with the skill players that they've brought in this cycle. I think that would be a championship caliber type group as they try and build back this offense up to that level. And then it's about offensive line recruiting and getting those blue chippers on defense we just talked about.
Steve, earlier today, you put in a crystal ball for Aaron Butler to end up with the Colorado Buffaloes. What has you leaning Coach Prime and Colorado for Aaron Butler?
I've talked to several sources about Aaron Butler today, and they, adding it all up, I like where Colorado stands. And this is a recruitment that's had a lot of movement, Blair. As you know, at one point it looked like he was going to be a Georgia Bulldog. And then not so recently, it looked like Oregon was in fantastic shape, and I'm not ruling any program out for Aaron Butler. I just think his return trip for his official visit to Colorado for the Buffalo spring game, which included getting mom on campus, was a major needle mover. He thinks that Colorado is going to be back sooner than later. Talked about how fast the players have bought into the program. He's built a great rapport with the coaching staff, and I think that Colorado has the momentum. Now, our colleague Greg Biggins, who's close to Aaron Butler's recruitment, says that Butler still plans on taking his official visits to Miami and Alabama. So those are 2 other programs to keep an eye on in the future. But right now, I love where Colorado stands for one of their most coveted targets.
Steve, you want to know what's pretty awesome? We're already at 70 likes on the show, so I don't have to ask for 50. I can just go straight ahead with 100. So show the people. Oh.
Get these lights out.
National Star Wars Day, and Steve has 2 lightsabers. Come on. He's asking for likes in his own special way. Go ahead, hit that like button if you have not already. But we have more to talk about because our War Daddy series continues with the 5-star linebacker Sammy Brown, our own director of scouting, Andrew Ivins, who's about to be on this show, and our recruiting analyst, Cooper Patagna, brought up an interesting comparison to the number 1 linebacker on their podcast. Here's a clip.
Like the next version of Brian Bosworth, man.
Yeah, that's the comp.
Right. I mean, we could potentially see him on a Sports Illustrated cover one day with just the pads on. So I mean, he's got it going on, man. He's got a swaggy look to him. He's got the mullet going on. He's flying around the football field. He can do a little bit of everything.
I love the comparison. Does have that swaggy look about him. I don't know if any of us could pull off that kind of hair, but I mean, mad respect for Sammy Brown. It of course makes sense why Andrew and the rankings team named him the number 1 player at his position. But from what you've seen, Steve, why is that an accurate assessment of Sammy Brown?
Well, similar hairstyles, although we do know that Sammy Brown, all his strength is natural, going back to
Fair point.
This has been a path for Sammy Brown for a long time. Started with just body weight lifts and then bar lifts with his dad when he was young to what you see today, which when you look at Sammy Brown from a combination of size, strength, and speed in the 2024 class, there's not a player on the level of the 6'2", 230-pound Brown, who probably just best described as a mutant with the skill set and traits that he has.
Recruiting wise, a few dozen offers already for him, and it includes some of the best programs across the country. Georgia, Clemson, Ohio State are among the schools pursuing him. What's the latest with him? What's next for the nation's number 5 rated player?
Yeah, talking to his coach today, Travis Nolan at Jefferson, he was like, there's no wow moments with Sammy Brown. It's wow all the time when they watch him work, and that's why he's so coveted, a two-way standout for them. A guy that rushed for 1,600 yards, 2-time state champ in wrestling, that also is one of the top sprinters and long jumpers in the state. He's got his 5 finalists. He's got Clemson, he's got Georgia, he's got Ohio State, he's got Tennessee, and he's got Oklahoma. And if I was handicapping that race right now, I like where Georgia stands. Brown has been to Athens numerous times, been there for a recent spring practice. He's been there for 6 a.m. workouts. Got a great relationship with Coach Smart and Coach Schumann and company, and likes the way that the program practices. The spring practice he went to, said was the most physical spring practice he's ever seen, loves the track record and player development. And so with that, I think Georgia's in excellent position. Now, Clemson is a program that he loves. He's been to Clemson for camp going back to 6th grade when he lost his bag at practice, and in front of all the campers, they announce, whose bag is this? It's Sammy Brown's bag. So Sammy has to go up in front of the whole camp in 6th grade and do up downs with Dabo Sweeney. He was the first player in the 2024 class that Clemson offered because they've had that relationship with him going back to elementary school. He's been to the Tigers campus a ton. He's going to be back for his official visit the weekend of June 2nd. Georgia will get the official visit the weekend after that. But the history that he has with the program, he says it's the best culture in college football. He just loves being on campus. Clemson certainly is very much in this race alongside Georgia. Now, the other programs that he loves a lot that are still on the table with a chance to make a run, I put Oklahoma in that next position. He's going to go there the 3rd weekend in June because he loves Clemson so much, is why he loves Brent Venables. He's part of that whole deal of relationships and knowing him for so long. He's been to Norman a couple times, has enjoyed it, and loves the fact that Venables coaches the linebackers, loves the fact that Venables is a defensive coordinator, then loves the fact that Venables is a head coach. So that checks all the Sammy Brown boxes as far as position, play caller, and head coach. Tennessee is going to get an official visit from Sammy Brown the weekend of Memorial Day, and that is a massive recruiting weekend for Tennessee. They'll have a lot of top targets in for unofficials, but Sammy's going to come in for his official. He's got family in the Knoxville area. He's really hit it off with Coach Heupel and Coach Brian Jean Mary, and loves the trajectory of that program. That's one that was ranked number 1 this year. He thinks they're in the hunt for SEC titles for years to come. Loves talking football with those guys. Looks forward to getting back for an official visit. And then Ohio State, they're going to get the last official visit. That'll be a big weekend on the Buckeyes campus. Kingston will be there at the same time. He loves Jim Laurinaitis, loves Jim Knowles. Talked about their old school mentality. And so Ohio State, he's been there a couple times, very high on the Buckeyes as well. But Georgia, Clemson, I think they're in the best position right now for Sammy Brown.
And Dogs fans watching your segment today, Steve, are just so excited about the potential for their squad.
Like buttons, lightsaber buttons.
It's a like saber. Yes, exactly. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Man, I hope somebody is clipping this so we can this has got to be some sort of meme or GIF or something. But thank you, Steve. We appreciate you.
Absolutely.
May the 4th be with you. Hey, here's your reminder to purchase an annual VIP membership to 24/7 Sports. It comes with intel and news that you can't find anywhere else. And also, I bet you didn't know this, it comes with a Paramount Plus membership. So pull out your camera, point it at the screen. There's a very convenient QR code. Scan it. It's so easy. It's so cheap. Get it done. All of us here on the College Football Recruiting Show, we would like to say, may the 4th be with you. We were, of course, inspired by the iconic franchise and the day of celebration, so we're going to play a little game of 5-Star Wars. Here's how it works. we will compare 5 stars from this current cycle against 5 stars from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Last year's class. So get ready for some healthy debate. It's 5-star wars. Who better to get in on all the fun than the guy who helped rank all of these prospects, our director of scouting, Andrew Ivins. I hope you're a Star Wars fan because we are leaning in today. So let's start, how about at the wide receiver position? The number 1 player at that position in 2023 was USC's Zachariah Branch. We're putting him up against the number 1 wideout in 2024. That's Ohio State commit Jeremiah Smith. So Andrew, between these two, who are you taking?
I'm taking Jeremiah Smith, and I obviously like both of these guys. Zachariah Branch, someone who was on my Greeks list last year, but these are 2 different types of wide receivers. I think Branch is kind of your prototypical electric playmaker in the slot, and then when you have Jeremiah Smith, he's that big outside wide receiver. It's funny, Chaminade Madonna, where Jeremiah Smith goes to school, and Bishop Gorman, where Zachariah Branch goes to school, they both played each other back in December in a bowl game. Branch, I guess you could say, he opted out. He didn't partake in that exhibition. Jeremiah Smith did play. It was probably the worst game of his career. Chaminade Madonna blown out, only put up 14 points on offense. But I think when you look at the resume of Jeremiah Smith, you know, he's cousins with Geno Smith, who just signed a big deal with the Seattle Seahawks. He's a state qualifier and the 110 and 300 meter hurdles. And then you just put on the film. I mean, he makes extremely difficult catches look routinely easy. He can pull away from defenders, monster catch radius. He can block. He's the total package. So I'm going Jeremiah Smith. I like Zachariah Branch, but we're trying to project to Sundays and build a wide receiver room around someone. I'm going with Jeremiah.
Andrew and Emily, I'm really going to lean into this. I'm going with Zachariah Branch because he's faster than a drone racer. He's got more wiggle than BB-8. And Andrew, I'm surprised that you went with Jeremiah Smith because you're the biggest Zachariah Branch fan I know. You know, we've talked about you being a tight ends guy. Well, I thought you were a Zachariah Branch guy. I've said it time and time again that I think Zachariah Branch becomes a favorite target for Caleb Williams early on in his college career at USC. He can blow the top off the defense. He's going to be a really reliable pass catcher underneath. I think the only question mark you have about him is his durability and his size, but if you've seen any photos of him and how he looked during the spring at USC, you know that he's packed on the muscle, and the comp for him is Tyreek Hill. What better comp than Tyreek Hill right now in the NFL when you think about projecting out? So I'm going Zachariah Branch, Andrew.
You both make great arguments. Do you have something, Andrew?
I was going to say, I mean, Julio Jones is the player comp for Jeremiah Smith, so we're talking about 2 good guys right here.
I mean, we're talking about 5 stars, so they're all very good. Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, Cheetah is the comp for Zachariah Branch. No, I think you bring up some good points, and I'm excited to see what Zachariah looks like, you know, this upcoming season. I think he's going to play. You know, it's a loaded wide receiver room there in Los Angeles, but he's someone that can impact the game as a returner. We saw that in the Under Armour All-America game. I think they'll find ways to generate some touches for him. And we talked about the bloodlines with Jeremiah Smith. I mean, Zachariah Branch, related to Cliff Branch, who won a pair of Super Bowls, was also a decorated sprinter at the college level. Again, 2 really good guys.
2 very talented players. Let's continue with the talented players. Let's go to running back. The top back in 2023, Texas signee Cedric Baxter versus the top back in this year's class, Jarek Gibson, who is uncommitted, but Texas also leads the crystal ball for his services. There's a chance that these 2 could be teammates, so tread lightly here, Andrew. Who we got, Baxter or Gibson?
Give me Cedric Baxter. It's a guy, you know, I just broke down the 2023 NFL draft. We saw 2 running backs go in the top 12. What do those 2 running backs have in common? I'm talking about Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Both those guys as seniors ran for over 2,000 yards at it, 11 yards per carry there in their final prep seasons. Cedric Baxter didn't run for 2,000 yards as a senior at Orlando Edgewater, but he was on pace. He in 4 of his first 6 games went over the 200-yard mark, got dinged up a little bit, and didn't finish out the season. But I'm a big believer in Baxter. He's a guy that can get it done in between the tackles. He can catch the football out of the backfield. There's one time this guy was a wide receiver. When I first went to his school, the coaches introduced him to me and said he was a safety. He can move. He can do it all. And I think I'm cheating here a little bit because we saw Cedric Baxter in Texas's spring game, and he was awesome. So I just like the body of work from Cedric. He finished as a 5-star for us. We'll see where Jarrett Gibson ultimately finishes in the 2024 rankings. But I think Cedric Baxter has a chance to hear his name called in the first round of the NFL draft one day.
Yeah, the issue right now, right, is snaps. If they both end up in Austin, and the crystal ball right now is on Texas for Jarrett Gibson as well. But give me Jarrett Gibson because I feel like he's more explosive than a Death Star. The way that he's able to do things out in the open field, the burst that he has when he attacks the holes, and the way he fills out gaps is really impressive. And I think if he does end up at a place like Texas, which Steve Sarkisian has been known to really utilize those pass-catching running backs, I think the potential and the upside is through the roof. So give me Jarrett Gibson, and you can take Cedric Baxter.
I like it. Let's talk the big guys. I'm excited to see who Blair compares these guys to. Let's go to the offensive line. The top tackle in 2023 was Alabama's Caden Proctor. This year, it's Brandon Baker, and his recruitment is wide open. In the battle between Proctor and Baker, Andrew, who are you taking?
I feel like I missed the pre-production meeting where you guys said we needed all like Star Wars comps. I'm a little upset I wasn't a part of that. I'm going Caden Proctor. You saw the video right there. Shout out to the producers who pulled that thing. Caden Proctor was on my freaks list, right? And we know we loved him because of his raw power, and a lot of it was that video. But as the recruiting process went on, I fell in love with Caden Proctor, saw him or watched his state title game performance. I thought he was excellent there. And then we saw him in San Antonio at the All-American Bowl, and he was excellent. There's not a lot of big bodies like him that move like that. He's in control. He's excellent with the kick step. I like Brandon Baker. I just don't think Brandon Baker is the type of athlete that Caden Proctor is right now. And Caden Proctor, he looked like he was headed to Iowa, which just had a bunch of guys drafted. He ends up flipping late in the process to Alabama, which just had a bunch of guys drafted. And I think Caden Proctor is going to have a chance to push for playing time here in 2023. The Crimson Tide needs some help up front on the offensive line. Caden Proctor, his arrow's still pointing up, but he seems to be well ahead of the curve. So I like Caden Proctor. Brandon Baker, really good player as well. Not sure he's a true tackle, but he's good as well there at Mater Dei in California.
A lot of positional versatility, Andrew, with Brandon Baker. I feel like he could play inside. He could play one of those tackle positions. I think he's just really steady and really reliable. Maybe, I don't know, the Millennium Falcon kind of comes to mind, right? Maybe something that's not super flashy or super athletic, but you know that you can trust the Millennium Falcon to get you through the day, and that's what Brandon Baker does. He keeps Elijah Brown, one of the best quarterbacks in the country at Mater Dei. He keeps them upright most of the game, and they're facing really tough teams last year. Bishop Gorman, St. John Bosco twice, that tough Trinity League schedule, and Brandon Baker seemed like every week was getting better and better. So I like Brandon Baker. I like his potential at the next level. I love what he can do either inside or outside, depending on the scheme or depending on the need. So I'm going to go with Brandon Baker on this one.
I like it. Andrew, if it makes you feel better, I think Blair is kind of going rogue here, which I absolutely love. This was not something that we planned.
Wiltfong had props. He's got two. I know he's got kids at home, but he's got 2 lightsabers. I got a hockey stick right here. That's all I got, right? Playoff hockey, but I do not have lightsabers. Wow.
That Steve has young children, so that totally makes sense. Producer just pointed out to me in my ear, he's going Rogue One, so let's just throw in another Star Wars reference there. But let's wrap it up here with some defensive linemen. You got Alabama's Keon Keeley versus Elijah Rushing. Now, as we mentioned earlier on the show, Rushing is considering Notre Dame, Oregon, Tennessee, among others. Andrew, Keeley or Rushing?
I'm going with the Viking. Is there any Vikings in Star Wars? I'm trying to go through my database here. I'm a huge fan of Keon Keeley, and I think if you look at Elijah Rushing and Keeley right now, so we're talking spring before their senior seasons, I think Keeley is much further along than Elijah Rushing. And that's a little bit scary because I think Keeley took a major step developmental-wise as a senior. And then by the time we saw him at the All-American Bowl, he was a completely different player. So we're talking about a guy that's already ahead of Rushing before their 12th grade years. And then in the prep finale there in San Antonio, I mean, he was an animal off the edge. This is a guy that can transition speed to power. He's long. He has a knack for batting balls down at the line of scrimmage. Was going to head to Notre Dame and play for Marcus Freeman, ends up flipping to Alabama. I think that he could have a Will Anderson type of impact up front in the SEC. So I'm going Keon Keeley, the Viking, the guy who has been to Norway 12 times. Also, I think sang in the choir. He has quite the story. And between the ears, man, he has all of it. Off the field, he's like a young Luke Skywalker, right? He's always, I got one. He's always looking to learn, and I think that's going to be the difference for him, right? He wants to be really good, and he's going to a program where they can churn you out and get the most out of you.
Andrew, I don't know if there is a Viking in the Star Wars universe, but there is an evil empire, and that's who I think Keon Keeley will be playing for this fall. So give me Elijah Rushing. This is a player with all the upside in the world physically, about 6'6", 250, has that quick first step. He's doing boxing as a side workout to improve his hand usage. He's doing track to improve that burst. And when you think about him as a recruit, he would give a lot of these schools a cornerstone of a defender up front. You think about the schools that he's considering. Arizona, he would be the hometown hero. At Notre Dame, he would be kind of that next in line. They just had Isaiah Foskey drafted. Tennessee, we talk a lot about their offensive playmakers that they've been able to land on the recruiting trail. Well, he would be a key component of what they want to do on the defensive side of the ball. And then you think about, some of these other places that he's considering, Washington, it just seems like he would be able to give these teams a new hope. So give me Elijah Rushing.
Well done, both of you. Andrew, thank you for playing along and joining in on the fun. We appreciate it.
I'm waiting for next year. I'm going to watch all the movies, right? I'll be ready to go with my Star Wars comps for these 5 stars.
I love it. Start now, because there are many, many movies for you to get through. But
and I'll have a lightsaber as well. I'll get some props.
I love it. Just pop on Amazon. I'm sure they have that there. Thank you. When you're not going to be watching the movies, you're going to be on the podcast. Listen to the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast hosted by Andrew Ivins and Cooper Patagna. You got episodes dropping in your feed every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, wherever you get your podcasts. We're introducing a new segment this week. It's called our Staying Power Series. We're going to highlight a few programs who have found themselves inside the top 25 that maybe we're not used to seeing there. So we're starting things off with the Demon Deacons of Wake Forest, currently number 11 in the team rankings. They are hot, hot, hot. Time now to welcome in our friend Les Johns, the publisher of Demon Deacon Digest. Les, for a little perspective here, every class since 2020, before this one, finished no better than 63rd. So what do you make of all of this early success?
Well, it's a function of 2 or 3 different items here, and I didn't bring my Star Wars props either. I have a couple of lightsabers, but we won't get into that today. One, the Deeks have struck early, and they've struck often. They were intent on having all their major targets visit during spring camp, and most of those guys did. They visited spring camp. They got a chance to tour the facilities and be with the coaching staff, and the staff struck while the iron was hot. So Wake has 15 guys in the boat already, and it's kind of like a numbers game right now. There's a lot of guys committed to Wake Forest. The average level of recruit is higher than in previous classes, but there's also just more of them right now. So as other schools start to fill up their classes as well, the Deeks will fall a little bit behind. They're not going to stay number 11. I don't think the 2024 class will finish 11th, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. but there's some quality guys in that class that the staff is really excited about. They hit some of their top targets early, and now it's going to be key to hold on to those guys.
Les, with all the success that Wake Forest has had over the last 7 years, how do you think the perception of the program has changed among recruits and their coaches, their families, people that are considering the institution?
Well, there's several things at play there, right, Blair? One is there has been a lot of success on the field. The Deacons have been to 7 straight bowl games. Just 2 years ago, they won an ACC Atlantic Championship and fought Pittsburgh for the ACC title. You know, the last 2 seasons, they've been in the mix for potential Orange Bowl bids. But then there's also the success that they're sending people to the NFL. Jesse Bates just got picked up by the Atlanta Falcons and signed a massive deal. Guys like Kobe Turner and Bergie Basham and A.T. Perry and Zach Tom are getting signed, are getting drafted, and having success in the league. So there's all that. But then there's also when the kids get on campus, and this is probably one of the biggest secrets about Wake Forest athletics, is that this is a program that's invested over the last 7 years more than $100 million just in football facilities. $100 million. I defy any national analyst to come out and take a look at the facilities and not rank it as among some of the best facilities in all of college football. When kids get on campus and they see what's going on, they're quite honestly surprised and they're blown away by what they're seeing. There's incredible staying power and tenure with the coaching staff. And it's a program that's kind of built solid from the ground up that should continue to win football games.
Speaking of 100 million, that is a lot. We don't have nearly that many likes right now, but we did reach 100, which, Les, that's a really big deal on this show. That means that I'm just going to now ask for 150. So if you have not already hit that like button, go ahead and smash it. You mentioned this, though. I mean, it's not just the high ranking. I mean, it's the sheer size of this class that also stands out. In each of the last 3 cycles, Wake hasn't taken more than 20 total high school recruits, and they have 15 already in this cycle. So what pieces are maybe still on the board for Dave Clawson's group to potentially finish? You said maybe not 11, but top 25 would be awesome.
Top 25 will still be pushing it. I think if I had to wager, I would say this is a class that could settle in between the 30 and 40 mark. Right now, their average recruit ranking is coming in at about 86.5, which would still be the highest mark of any class in the Clawson era. There's still room for some more additions, too. The classes the last 2 to 3 years have been smaller because there's been a great impact from that COVID season with a lot of super seniors coming back for Wake Forest. And obviously, as we move forward, those numbers are going to start to dwindle until they just completely disappear, right? So I expect the class to be more than 20 this season. It probably isn't going to be 25 or 30, but I don't think they're stopping at 15. There's still some room for a couple key offensive playmakers, and they're probably still looking for some help in the secondary.
Probably pacing for their best class ever, but if they don't finish inside the top 25 rankings, like you mentioned, Les, what are some challenges? What is standing in the way of Wake Forest truly becoming an elite recruiting institution?
Well, there's a couple challenges. One is when you get these, right now there's 9 top 1,000 players, ranked in this class right now. And Wake Forest does an incredible job of evaluating talent. And other schools know that too, right? So those are going to be prime targets over the next, well, how many months is it till November? Signing day is still, 6 months away. It's going to be 6 long months of these kids having their phones being blown up because they know, they've committed to Wake Forest and they're quality recruits. So Wake Forest will have to fend off others to hold on to some of these guys while still adding the key guys they need down the stretch. Historically, there's been, Micah Mays faced tremendous pressure late last cycle, from the Florida schools to flip. 2 years ago is Wesley Grimes, who the Deacons held on to. Wake has traditionally held up good against people trying to get their guys to flip late, but there's going to be a lot of targets, and they've got a lot of irons in the fire to hold those kids and hold them into the boat. And Wake usually doesn't have their official visits until late in the cycle, usually in November. So it's a long time until they get on campus for that official visit and have a chance to firmly cement as a Demon Deacon.
Long time between now and then. We know you will be on top of it, though. Thank you for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And if you want to hear and read more of Les's work and the whole crew, check out Demon Deacon Digest. It is the best place to go if you're a Wake Forest fan. Even if you're not, if maybe you're a fan of another team in the ACC, it's a good way to keep tabs on the opponent, see what's going on Demon Deacon Digest. Well, even when we say goodbye, the recruiting world just keeps on spinning. So here is your weekend watch list, some headlines to send you into the weekend. We are Commitment HQ. 4-star wide receiver Channing Goodwin out of North Carolina will make his commitment live right here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. That is Sunday at 4 Eastern. He is choosing between Michigan, UNC, South Carolina, NC State, Wake Forest, Virginia, and Virginia Tech. Blair, whoever gets him, gets what?
One of the best receivers in America. Channing Goodwin is explosive after the catch, but the thing that I really like about him is he's got a terrific feel for soft spots in coverage, and he's a reliable chain mover. So you mix in all the intangibles that he has and the speed to get behind a defense, he's a well-rounded pass catcher.
Over in your neck of the woods, UCLA is set to host its biggest recruiting weekend of the offseason so far. The Bruins will host some commitments and some top 247 targets like Braden Platt, Dylan Williams, among more. Blair, why is this such an important weekend for Chip Kelly and company?
I think it would set the tone for UCLA. It's not long ago that the Bruins weren't bringing in official visitors until the start of the season, but they have changed up their strategy and really targeted this month as a key part of their recruiting cycle. So we know that they like to attack the transfer portal. High school recruiting is becoming even more important for UCLA as they make that move over to the Big Ten. So watch out for the Bruins this weekend.
We are watching. We will have a full recap on Monday's show, so be sure to tune in. The next Elite 11 regional will take place this weekend in Mississippi. Some of the top quarterbacks down south will try to punch their ticket to the finals. Blair, who are you looking forward to seeing out of this regional?
It's going to be a really interesting regional, just looking at some potential attendees and players that are expected to be down in Oxford. Walker White, the Auburn commit, who is obviously from the region, will be there. And we could be seeing a potential SEC showdown with him and Demond Williams, who's already committed to Ole Miss. Those were two targets for the Rebels and Lane Kiffin in this recruiting cycle. So I'm really excited to see who emerges, whether one or both get that ticket to the Elite 11 finals in Los Angeles this summer. Walker White, Demond Williams, two major headlines that will be down in Oxford. I haven't been able to confirm whether Lane Kiffin will be on campus to check out that event, but it's going to be, I think, a really interesting weekend.
I just want to know if Juice Kiffin is going to be there, Lane's dog. He is spectacular. He had a great post today, too, for National Star Wars Day, so go ahead and check that out. It's our favorite time of the show. We're going to answer your viewer questions, and as always, I love how these are just incredibly straightforward, but also very challenging. So PG Show's asking, where is 5-star linebacker Justin Williams going to land? Blair, please predict the future for us.
It sounds like Oregon has a lot of the buzz right now. He was just up in Eugene for the spring game inside Autzen Stadium, and the buzz is coming that he really liked what he heard from Dan Lanning and that staff. One of the best linebackers in the country, a top 20 player nationally in the composite, top 55 in the 24/7 sports rankings from the state of Texas. And for him to go up to Eugene and go up to that spring game, this past weekend, I think it showed a lot about his interest in the program. You can't count out Dan Lanning, especially for a defensive side of the ball prospect, and he's been known to go up against some heavy hitters and some other talented or some other programs that like to bring in talented defensive prospects. So right now it looks like the Ducks have a little bit of momentum there with Justin Williams.
All right, good to know. Hannah G would like to know, why isn't there more buzz for Elijah rushing to Florida since he's a legacy with the Gators?
Yeah, that's one of the really interesting questions, I think, of this recruiting cycle, because his father, George, was a tight end there in the early 1990s, I believe. His brother, Cruz, was a walk-on for the Florida Gators last season, transferred to Arizona to be closer to home, and he is now a full scholarship athlete for the Wildcats. It just seemed like maybe Florida and Elijah Rushing didn't continue to communicate it as heavily as they were when Cruz was there. So maybe that's an explanation. Right now, if you would peg him to go to an SEC school, it would be Tennessee. They're the only school that has locked in an official visit with Elijah Rushing. You have Oregon in there. You have Notre Dame, who I really think maybe has the front runner label right now in this recruitment. And then you have Arizona, which would give him the ability to stay close to home and play for the hometown school and Jed Fish. But Florida, in a way, has fallen behind, and it's really puzzling because I think they had a lot of the momentum early on in the battle.
Yeah, not only are Florida fans watching right now bummed that they're not in the Elijah Rushing sweepstakes, but it's really just dagger to the heart when you hear that he's interested in their rival in the University of Tennessee. So still a long way to go to figure out where he's going. I still remain, 5-star talent, of course, but names, just perfect name there. Jason D would like to know, how does Oklahoma's class look this season after Venables' first cycle last year? Before you answer, I'll tell the people right now, they are 25th with 6 commits, so still very early on, but what's it look like, Blair?
I think you have to like what they're doing, right? Last year, top 5 class nationally, they closed with a flurry, and they had obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the land in Jackson Arnold. So they checked off a lot of their needs, and they were able to get a lot of the prospects that they needed to get in that cycle. The obvious concern for them was the on-field results didn't really correlate with what they were doing on the recruiting trail. So I think a lot of the success that they did have in recruiting was because of kind of that honeymoon period that Brent Venables had, right? You bring in, you sell a vision, you're able to recruit at a high level. Now with this 2024 class, maybe you're seeing the effects of that, so first year under the new coaching regime, and I think they have to show a little bit more heading into their move over to the SEC to be contending for some of these players. And I think something that we do have to bring up is something that Steve Wiltfong keeps mentioning, is that Oklahoma, like some of these blue bloods nationally, they're in on some key targets that maybe just aren't ready to make their decisions, right? They are going through the process, so maybe we won't see them have the success early on in a cycle that maybe we have been seeing from other schools like a South Carolina, like a Wake Forest, who we just talked about. So yeah, I think right now, wait and see mode with Oklahoma, and obviously I think the season will be really key as Brent Venables tries to right the ship.
Yep. Not how you start, it's how you finish. That proof of concept would certainly go a long way in building this class. One more, we got this kind of last-minute addition here from Fifth Quarter asking, how do you feel about Oregon recruiting more in the state of Florida? Follow-up question, is it worth the efforts?
I do think it's worth the effort, right? We've always talked about Oregon and the speed that they play with, and having a really attractive brand of football, even through all the coaching changes, right? Chip Kelly kind of established that as a blur offense with, all the points and the fast athletes. Willie Taggart did that, Mark Helfrich did that, even Mario Cristobal was doing that as well. And I think we're seeing Dan Lanning also embrace that brand, embrace the appeal that Oregon has as a national program. So you go into the state of Florida because you get those athletes, you get the speed, you get the explosiveness, and obviously with Dan Lanning having so many ties in the SEC country and in the South, he has to continue to parlay that success in the past that he had at Georgia and potentially attract talent to go to the Pacific Northwest with him. And obviously, I think that's a major reason why he was the hire to begin with. That's why the administration brought him to Eugene. So you have to ride with his approach. You have to go and allow him, as some people would say, you have to let him cook, right? You have to go and let him go to the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, some of these places that are maybe a little further away and exert a lot of effort and time and energy to recruit them. But I think it pays off when you do notch some of these recruiting victories and add that speed and explosiveness to your roster.
Oh yeah, a lot of talent in the Sunshine State. A lot of competition to get that talent though, but certainly cannot hurt to try. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for liking today. It's not too late to hit that like button on the way out. For Blair Angulo, I'm Emily Proud, and this is the College Football Recruiting Show.